computer hide panel. All right, so forms. In React, forms are, it's required to make your forms controlled through two-way data binding, which, yay, new words. To do this, what that means is says if I make a form down here, it needs to be tied to state, and the state needs to be tied to the form. They both need to be communicating back and forth so that as soon as the user types one letter into an input, our state is immediately updated to save it. So we're saving every single letter they're typing every step of the way, which is different than vanilla, right? We just let them input it and then hit submit, and that's when we grab their value. In React, it's different. We have their value every time they press a letter. And we want that so it's completely controlled. But because of that, there's a few pieces that we need to do this. But just know a controlled component is a component where state keeps current with any user input. So they type hello, states, text, or whatever we call it, we'll say hello. Like it knows exactly what they're typing every step of the way. All right, so parts of how do we build a form and all the parts required. So building a form. Part number one, we need a form with inputs and a button. So there's no difference with that setup. Hooray. I will make my form. There's my form. And what is it? What does a form do by default? Cool. Refresh the page. That doesn't change. We're still using forms. And the button in the form will still cause a submit event. So refreshing still occurs. So part one, build a form with an input, at least one input and a button inside of it. Any questions on that part? Cool. Step two. Everything in our, every input needs three attributes, namely name, value, and onChange. Every input needs these three attributes with the way that we're building forms. We've seen name before, right? This is how we selected the item in vanilla JavaScript to get the value. Name has a slightly different purpose in this context, but the name should still absolutely represent what this input is for. So we're going to build this input to take a first name. I'm going to call this first name. And whatever the name is has to be the piece of state, first name. That needs to match exactly. So the name I give the input is the name I add to state, so the input can be managed and tracked in state. They're not connected yet, but we're building up the framework to get them connected. Okay, the value attribute we give it must be referencing this piece of state. And this is creating that two-way data binding. So your value should always display what this .state.firstName has currently saved. All right, so the name is the literal text. The value is the literal value. And at this point, it gets a little long on input, so I'm going to break them on their own line. And what's the final attribute this input needs? OnChange. What is that? How do we know that's an event?
Well, I mean, it's
camel case and it starts with the word on. Yeah, that's the React convention. If you're writing a change event in JavaScript, regular is this change. In React, it's onChange. When does an onChange event fire? OnChange, yeah. So if I type a letter into my input box, this event fires. So we can give it a function or a method to call every single time the user enters a letter, it's going to call a method, and that method needs to update the part of state that this input's referencing, one piece at a time. And that's what the onChange is doing for us. So the method, one of the two required methods, we'll go to the part 3 next. You must have a handle change type method. I say type because it may not be called handle change. That's just the convention. You can play with that later when we're building different forms. But this is the convention in React. We build an event on change, and we build a handler to handle the event called handle change. This is just our function. If this was vanilla JavaScript, we'd be saying, you know, form.addEventListener change handle change is our function we want it to call. So this is what we're setting up right now for our form.
So handle change is just the function that's going to happen on that event?
Yep, handle change is what's going to happen every time they type a letter.
Same thing with like handle put.
Yep. So we write handle change. This is a required piece for the form. So the onChange can call this .handle change. And this one's not required, but placeholders work the same in React. So I'll say this is for first name. And there we go. Still, you know, default, it's not prevented, but that's fine. Handle change is arguably the hardest part of this. So we're gonna hit it here for a second. What do event handlers receive from the event when the event is called? There's some sort of data object that is passed to the function that's handling the event. Think vanilla JavaScript. I said form.addEventListener submit. Then I write a function here. What does this function receive? It receives the event. What is the event? What data type is this? It's an object. What does this object tell us? Generally, I mean, it can tell you all sorts of things, but generally, what is this event object for? Oh, yeah, it has a lot of info. It can tell us, we can use it to prevent defaults, but it also tells you exactly where the event occurred. You may not have seen this yet, but in vanilla JavaScript, if we were to console log event.target, this would console log the literal button or form or wherever the event occurred. So the event.target is extremely important because when we're typing in this input, we want to know it's this input. So onChange, the handle change method will receive an event object where the event.target is the input that they're typing in. So event.target, very important. We're going to use it all the time now. So handle change receives the event. And I make place for it here. So slightly different syntax, but same exact concept. And what we need to do is set state to first name to be whatever the value is that they're typing in. So what is the only way to set to update state? This.setState. And let's try it this way first. So what part of state do we want to update? First name. And I want to update it to the value of the event target. This input. This is where they're typing. This is the event.target. And the event.target has a dot type, a dot name, a dot value, a dot onChange, and a dot placeholder. What property of this is going to hold the value of what the user's typing? Value. That hasn't changed. The value still represents that. So we're going to set state to be the event.target.value. Because that is the literal value of where the event occurred, which is this input's value, what the user's typing. Now this won't work as well as we want. There's some stuff we need to add to this, but let's look at it. Have you been using React DevTools at all? Well, this is where it starts getting even more fun because not only can you see your props, you can see your state as well, and you can see it change live. So notice now when I type the letter A, state is immediately updated. The change event fires, it captures my A value, saves it in state. This page refreshes or re-renders, and the value of the input, what they actually see, is set to what was just saved in state. This is two-way data binding, and it's a little bit of a spaghetti in your head for a while. So just know kind of the syntax of how to set it up, and when I type, it's keeping track. So I type B, and you can see state updating live. Right? Submitting will still refresh everything, and it's all gone. Another thing you can do to test this is inside of your render. Console.log this.state.first name. Now every time I type, it's keeping track of it. State is saving every letter at a time until I get this full sentence. Which is interesting. If my console log is right here, what does that tell you about render? Covered this briefly yesterday, but when is render called? Every time this .setState is called. As soon as setState is called and state updates, render is immediately called to make the view update as well. So that's why we're seeing this console log every single time I type, because this is being called right after the setState occurs. Okay. That should be good for now on that. We're just going to handle one input for the time being. So that is the handle change. You must have a handle change type method that updates state on user input. The last piece we need to set up a form is you must have a handle submit type method that fires on the form submission. So this is our submit event handler on the form. Well, what is the submit event called in React? If change is on change and click is on click, what do we think submit would be? Cool. So on submit on the form, we would like to call this dot, and what would the handler method be called? Handle submit. Keep it straightforward. So I'll come up here and write my handle submit. That also receives the event. And what do we need to do with that event on a submit event? What do submits do to your page by default? Refresh. So how do I stop that default? Cool. So that hasn't changed. Still got to prevent it. And then we can do whatever we want here. Because at this point in time, we're thinking points in time. So first they give us a bunch of string. Right now, first name and state. Oops, it's going to refresh everything. Right now, first name and state is equal to this string. When I hit submit, if I console log this.state.firstName, I should see this string exactly. Pull it open, and I'll say Joe somebody, hit submit. And that's how I capture the user's value using forms in React. You got to have these two methods. The input's got to have a name, value, and on change, and state has to represent the name of the input. We haven't seen Y on the name yet. We're not actually using the name yet, but we will shortly. Any questions up to this point? No, we're good. One last thing, we'll take a break. What if I want to see myself typing? So right here below my form, I'm going to make an H1 that references this.state.firstName. I just want to display what that looks like. What's cool about this is when I am typing, page is automatically Refreshing so I can see state. That alone I think is pretty fun, but.
So that's kind of like me, go back and you're just studying.
What's that?
No, that's fine. Yeah, I don't really like, I mean, Facebook is React, so like when you're making a post, you can actually see stuff. Is this what's happening?
Kind of, yes. There's much more to the process, but we will cover that whole process in time of how do we enter something, have it saved to a database, and then have it pop up on a screen instantly. We're getting there. Right now, I'm just displaying what state is maintained to show that every time I type or remove something, render is being called to re-render my H1 to show what state it actually represents right now. Can see state. Okay, let's stop there. Take a little break.